the more I invest in that change process, the more I'm prepared to actually do it when the time comes.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Say Goodbye and Imagine podcast. And today we have, I think, a pretty important topic with a great guest. He's a repeat guest. Anyway, the topic is understanding the stages of change, which it's a pathway to transformation. It doesn't happen overnight. And I want to welcome back David Jenkins. David is a professor of psychology and clinical director of the PsyD in clinical psychology program at Liberty University. He previously served for 18 years as a professor of counseling in the Department of Counselor Education and Family Studies. He served as the clinical director of the International Board of Christian Counselors of the American Association of Christian Counselors and on the executive board of the Society for Christian Psychology. Dr. Jenkins has also served on the executive draft committee for the 2014 and 2023 updates to the AACC Codes of Ethics for Christian Counselors. You got a lot of credentials there. I'm going to keep going though,
Uh,
because I like the next ones equally as well. With over 30 years of clinical experience, Dr. Jenkins specializes in the integration of Christian faith and clinical practice. You've worked extensively with addictive mood and anxiety disorders in the context of individual, marital, group, and family therapy. You've also provided education, consultation, supervision, and training for a variety of churches, ministries, and professionals. And you're married to your wife, Judy, for
yep.
40 years. Congratulations on that. That's
Yeah. Thanks a
kind of a
bunch.
big deal in these days. Hey,
Yep.
before we get started, I was telling David that his podcast previously was we talked about stigma, and we had 2 episodes there, and it was very widely received. It's one of our most viewed or listened to podcasts, so I encourage you to go back there. And if you like the content that we're bringing you on this podcast, please feel free to rate it, to refer others to it, to tell your friends about it, because that's how we make a difference in the lives of people that need help in this area. And there are a lot of people that
Yeah.
we know. So anyway, David, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be back. Appreciate the opportunity.
I want to share with the audience something I find a little humorous for me, only only because I wrote this book, and by the time this episode airs, it'll be released. It's called Prepare to Quit, and I had asked David to endorse it, and he read it, and he goes, "I don't think you understand what you're doing, but this aligns perfectly with the trans theoretical model of change." And I'm like, "What's that?"
Right.
And we're about to find out more about that. The reason I did the Prepare to Quit was having a lot of heartbreak for people I talked to. They want a change. They
Right.
absolutely want to change, but they're not ready.
Right.
And then others you talk to, okay, I'm in, I'm done, I'm ready.
Right.
What's the difference? What's the difference between those two? That's why I wrote the book. That's why David taught me about the theoretical change.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to look at today. So anyway,
Well, and right from the start, you're the sequence with which you've written the works is a little out of step with the stages, but they cover it. And and so I'm using the word naivete in the good sense of the word because it's actually, in my view, kind of a pure test of the truth of what you're saying, right? So we certainly get truth from God's word, but we also, God constructed this whole universe to show him off. So we certainly can also gather truth from his works. And so, in my role as a psychologist who is a clinician and an academician, I study those works, right? And the behavioral sciences are the only really systematic discipline that study the only beings created in the image and likeness of God in the whole universe. So we're going to find out about him and how he's designed us to bear that out. And it's all just reflective in your work. And
Yeah.
so for you to have the biblical foundation and the experience of your own journey to then line up so clearly with things that have been out there and known for a long time, just not known by everybody. You know what I mean? It's
I call that God at work.
yeah. Well, and that's it. And so, we participate in what he's already doing. And I think in large measure, that's why what you've done has been so valuable to so many so far.
Yeah, thank you.
And
Thank you.
personally, I think it's probably just getting started. And the beauty of it is, one of the beauties of it is it's just so organic. You know what I mean? It's just taking, you're casting these seeds, you're being faithful to what God called you to do, and others are responding, and the change that is produced in people's lives is visible and potent enough that others want some of that too.
Yeah,
And
and
that's how it works.
well, and that's what we want. I just,
Yeah,
as somebody who suffered through that, I hate to see others suffer when I see there's a path out. So,
right,
yeah. All
right.
right, well, let's jump in
Sure.
and talk about what is the trans theoretical model of
Right.
change, what's involved. We are going to do this in a two-part episode, and the break makes sense. What needs to be understood before we take action, and that's what
Right.
this episode is going to be about. So
Perfect.
let's start.
That was good. Well, Carlos Di Clemente really has been on the forefront of the development of this model for several decades, actually. And part of where he started was, just this question, right? That fuels research a lot of times. This question. So what is the change process behind people when they change addictive behavior? And so they started with the most naturalistic kind of substance that they were going to look at was they decided, all right, how do people stop smoking? How do people quit cigarette smoking? So that was kind of the original group that he studied and developed the model of how do people quit addictive behavior? What's the change process like? Now, somewhere along the line, and I don't know exactly when, I actually was able to, I was on a virtual webinar with him, along with a number of other people, but my question got asked to him, and that was, so when did you become aware that this stage of change model not only applies to people coming out of addiction, but it also applies to them coming into addiction?
Hmm.
And he just said, we were looking at the data, and basically he just had this moment of awareness. And, where it was, I, a lot of our aha moments, I think are really well defended duh moments, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he had this moment of insight. And think of the last time you had an aha moment. What was the very next thought? Duh, right? Because it was so obvious. Okay. So I believe there really are true insight moments, but I think I think he had one of those. It's like, wow, yeah, people don't start off addicted. So this whole stages of change model cuts across various theories of personality, theories of psychotherapy, how do people change and all that. That's why it's trans theoretical. It's just a basic kind of change model that can be applied all over the place. And the thing that I've always valued about this is that it really comes out of a naturalistically occurring change process that got studied. Because remember, our figures are pretty clear that most people who change addictive behavior do so on their own without seeking formal help.
Wow.
Now, the more severe the problem, the more distress, the more impairment, the more likely it is some kind of help will be needed. And so that's part of the value of your work. It is truly self-help not necessarily mutual help, but it's certainly open to all of that. And that's part of the strengths of it. And so to have a change model that can be applied across the various models, across the various theories, and across where people are in the change process, we can be at a different change process, a different stage of change depending on the area we're talking about. I may be moving well ahead in my area of changing addictive behavior, but I'm still lagging behind in my exercise, right? So this model can actually be applied to a bunch of different areas, of our life. And so we got to be careful not to get too linear about this
Okay.
and, too hardcore about it. But the model itself actually flows through changes. It's just we got to realize another area of someone's life, they could be at a totally different stage of change in that area. And for people who are struggling, sometimes we get, the depression and the shame kicks in and it just makes us very myopic, very nearsighted, so that we only can lock in on one thing. And if I'm not changing everything,
Oh,
you see what I mean? It's just so overwhelming rather than, wait a minute, let me kind of tease this out a little. I'm at a stage of change over here where I can focus on making progress on that.
yeah,
And
I'm still trying to change everything. And I just heard,
right.
I don't know if you know who Craig Rochelle is. I'm a big fan of him. He's the pastor of Life Church, and they created the YouVersion Bible app. But he's really into
Mhm.
this behavioral thing in the brain, and he's
Right.
like, you guys look at me and you think I've got it all together, and I'm disciplined. He goes, I got to change one thing at a time, and
Right.
every year I commit to changing one more thing.
Right. Now,
So,
the beauty of a change process, though, is the more I experience success in one area, the more that's likely to spill over to other areas as well, so that I end up gaining a sense of mastery over the change process, which,
amen,
go
amen,
ahead.
amen. Because this is what I've experienced about my own um journey is, well, I changed the smoking, but that was kind of hard and that didn't really
Mhm.
lead to insight because I didn't use insight. I probably used willpower.
Yeah,
And um but the insight I gained and the confidence I gained from the alcohol has led me to be stronger and just following God and being obedient.
right.
And that's and it's crazy. Not that everything's fixed, but I recognize um
And
s-
when we realize that, okay, perhaps God has shown us something about how he works through this change process. See, I can then submit to that change process where it's his change in me, and I'm now participating in something that he's already doing. And, I don't know that it necessarily gets easier. It just gets more purposeful, more intentional. And look, we're talking about how hope gets engendered. You know what I
right,
mean? Yeah.
right, and
All right.
that's the
So,
absolute basis and primary ingredient for
right.
changing this. But
Right.
what are the first three stages
There
of
you go. There you go. Exactly where I was going. Well,
yeah.
well, the first three stages, and then we'll do each one in sequence, is pre-contemplation, then contemplation, and then preparation. Now, those are followed by action and then maintenance, and we'll talk about those in the second piece. All right. So pre-contemplation, just again, kind of break the word down, contemplation, pre-contemplation, right? There are a lot of people that just have not ever really considered change. Now everybody else can see it. It's obvious to them and obvious to everybody else, but the person themselves just may not have ever even considered it. So a lot of people kind of confuse pre-contemplation and denial. They
Mm,
blend those together, and I'm saying, well, now wait a minute. Let's think about this for a second. If someone, it's not a problem for them, it's not been a problem for them, being a problem for others is not necessarily a problem for me. So in the technical sense of the word, denial is a very primitive defense mechanism. And defense mechanisms become active when we're under organismic threat. You know what I mean? When something is so threatening our existence and our well-being that I have to defend myself against that anxiety in these distorted ways. And one of the most primitive of those is denial, right? Denial of reality. See, distortion of reality is bad enough, but denial is like this reality doesn't exist. Well, see, from a defense mechanism perspective, I have to have had some kind of anxiety intense enough to provoke that defense mechanism.
Can I give you an example?
Sure.
And you know this about me because I was resistant to 12 step. So
Mhm.
I would definitely be in denial if somebody said, "I think you need to go to AA." I'm
Right.
like, I am not an alcoholic.
Right.
There you go. Denial.
Very well could be, but denial depends upon you having some recognition somewhere. It's already registered that I am under threat by this thing that I need to change, right?
I was under threat, even.
So pre-contemplation is just they've never had an opportunity. So I always encourage folks, look, I do believe that there is genuine denial that occurs. I'm just saying from a counselor perspective or from a peer perspective, I don't know that that should be our first place to go. I think this opens it up and fits very well with the work that you've been doing. Is it the first look, if my even if my goal, my first goal is to break through the denial, right? Let's think about that first. Let's contemplate that, right? Um, the best thing I could do is reduce the anxiety, reduce the fear. What's going to happen to the defense mechanism? It's going to go down,
Hmm.
right? Now, if someone has developed this denial as a survival mechanism, and my first goal becomes to take that away, what have I, the helper, just done to the helpee? I have increased their anxiety. Now, what does that do for denial? In the name of breaking through it, I've just increased it and supposed to be the helper,
Right.
right? So I do believe denial happens, but even if it does, the best thing to do is create a relational climate where
A
you reduce
safety.
anxiety.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. So pre-contemplation actually is a place I can go theoretically, according to this model, that's helped. I'm just going to assume maybe they've never had a chance to just willingly, openly consider and think about, is there anything in my life that needs to change?
Hmm.
And so each stage has tasks and each stage has goals. So pre-contemplation is a stage where there's little or no consideration of change of the current pattern of behavior in the foreseeable future. So they just aren't even considering it. Now, the task then is to increase awareness of the need for change, increase concern about the current pattern of behavior, and to start envisioning the possibility of change, right? So pre-contemplation, the task of that stage is to encourage awareness, engender a little bit of envisioning for change, and along with that, to increase concern on the person's part, right? That, maybe there's something I really need to take care of here. And so the goal is serious, get them to the place of consideration of change
And
for the
that's what I try and encourage people when
right.
they have us. It's super interesting to me that I have a lot of people who drink and their spouses drink too. Well,
Mhm.
once they've mastered it, they're kind of like acting disgusted towards their spouse. And I'm like,
Right.
uh, I, I don't know if that's going to motivate them, right?
Right.
Um, and so what I encourage them to do, I think is what you're saying, is
Mhm.
to approach the spouse one choose your timing, right? And
Yeah.
it's usually after an event has
Yeah,
happened.
and it's really helpful if if I'm expecting or wanting someone else to go through a process of change, um, I really may need to figure out how to get the plank out of my own eye.
Right.
And
Right.
maybe I just need to model the change process.
And that does happen a lot,
Yep.
the joy and the peace. But one
Right.
of the things I really encourage them to do is exactly what you just said, uh, to to say, look, this thing is
Yeah.
creating a disconnection between us, and
Right.
I love you.
Right.
What's possible if we kind of work on this? What's possible for us, right?
Right. Right.
Hope, love, connection,
Right.
compassion.
Right. And notice the difference in the assumptions, right? That assumption is more intimacy, more value,
more
more
con-
peace, more freedom,
More
right?
fun, more love,
Yeah, yeah. Versus the other assumption is you're a jerk and they're never going to get this. And look at what we got ourselves into, and neither of us, really care.
yeah.
So see, that's part of understanding how this change process can work, owning it, taking personal responsibility for your own change process, because that's enough to keep you busy. And when another individual is closely connected with you in a change process, something's going to change.
And
And you
I
don't even have to make an issue of it. You just stay focused on your change.
And I see that a lot as well. There's an accountability chapter, and of
Right.
course, a group accountability is phenomenal, regardless of where you choose to have your accountability. But I have seen multiple people heal with the
Mhm.
accountability
Oh,
coming from
oh
within
yeah,
the family unit, right?
that's right. I've seen, I have a number of situations where one person doing
Mm-hmm.
their part well had ripple effects through four generations of the family. Now, not every member of all generations changed, but there were significant changes in members of four generations of a family because one person took responsibility for their own change process.
Oh, I love
Yeah,
that.
it's amazing stuff, but that's how it works. All right. So, so the next phase in this process is then contemplation. All right, so you got pre-contemplation, now you're at contemplation. And that's the stage where they actually examine their current pattern of behavior and the potential for change. And so a risk reward kind of analysis is really helpful there. Now, one of the ways to kind of get at that is through something called the decisional balance. And it's not just the pros of change and the cons of staying the same, right? You've got to have both on both sides of the seesaw of the scale. So think of the benefits of change and the costs of the status quo staying the same versus the costs of change and the benefits of staying the same. Right. So you got to take all four of those elements and get them lined up right. So the benefits of change, costs of staying the same, costs of change, benefits of staying the same, and the decisional balance is about tilting that in the direction of change.
And
So that
you have given me a diagram to show that, and I'm going to include that diagram in the show notes. But that is, I think that's where you saw my chapters in my book. That is
Mhm.
definitely what I'm trying to work people
Right,
through, right? Choose your
right.
heart. Choose your heart.
And so
What?
and so when you tilt it that direction, and so what happens is if we only argue for the benefits of change, was the other person arguing silently, at least, if not outwardly? They're
Right.
arguing for why they need to stay the same. So that goes back to the nature and quality of the relationship I have with folks, and in this case with myself, right? I've also got to worry about the conversation in my own head. I have to be able to sort through, all right, what are the costs of staying the same and the benefits of change? And what are the costs of change and benefits of staying the same? And when I can tilt that in the direction of change, right? That's part of what that contemplation phase is about, right?
Right.
So it then helps me determine, yeah, I probably need to do this. Another really kind of simple but important um, tool, if you will, is called the importance confidence ruler. And it's just simply a 10-point scale ranked in terms of importance. Not important, no importance is zero, very important, extremely important is a 10. So how important is it to me that I make this change? How confident am I that I can actually pull off this change?
Oh, I like that. And you have a diagram for that I'm going to include the
Now,
importance.
I will often add a third one, and that is once you come up with kind of an action plan, how confident am I that this plan will help with this change? And so just simple things like that are graphics that help people get all this stuff out, all this stuff that's in their head, get it out of their head so that they can objectively look at it without becoming defensive, without having to react to it, without activating a whole bunch of shame. You know, that's really important when it comes to this change process. All right, so the goal of contemplation, the task of the goal of contemplation stage is analyzing the pros and cons of the current behavior pattern and the costs and benefits of change, and then start moving toward decision making, which is where the recent work with Dr. Carl,
Mm-hmm.
comes in. The whole decision making process starts to come into play as I'm thinking about this, as I'm contemplating this. So the goal of the contemplation stage is a considered evaluation that leads to a decision to change. So it's not now change is already starting to happen, right? But there's not a commitment or decision to a explicit kind of change yet, right? But that's coming. So I've moved from really just no awareness or very little to I'm thinking about it. There might be something here to now it's okay. I see this. Yeah, I need to make a change. Right. So you're
I love it.
going through that process, right?
And
Yeah.
then comes once you go,
Right.
okay, yep, something. And now I'm like listening to you and going through my own thing.
Right.
And that was COVID-19 hit. And I was like, I'm gonna die
Yeah.
if I don't do something about this.
Yeah.
I need to change, but I didn't know,
Right.
what I
And
needed.
so what will happen is that individuals will have their own kind of precipitants, their own kind of sparks for that change. And some people, have to get so far down the line, right? I'm going to die. And that wasn't, I just feel like I'm going to die. It's, I'm going to die if I don't change this. Okay, that's getting on down there in terms of motivation
And
for change. But for others, it might be, my job performance has just slipped over the past 6 months. And I think it's because of this alcohol that I've been using. I really need to change this. See, it's not life threatening. It may not even be threatening to their relationship. They just notice my job performance is slipping. So people have different variations. And what happens is we can get so invested that, well, somebody really hadn't hit bottom until they hit my bottom. I mean, that's not a very helpful way to go.
and that's honestly why I wrote the book, Prepare to Quit, to get people away from hitting what I call the proverbial brick wall. Don't wait till a diagnosis. Don't
Right,
wait till your spouse says they're leaving you.
right,
Don't wait till a car accident or a DUI. My
right,
goodness, let's just start openly talking about this and understanding who the real perpetrator is.
right. Well, and that's where the tone of most of your work comes into play in that imagine, I mean, in essence, the author, you are right there with them,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, not in a live, real time setting, but your style is very personable. And I think people understand you're with them in this, even though
Yeah.
you wrote the book and they're miles away and they've never met you. They understand somebody is with me in this process.
Right.
Well, see, that very thing helps the person get to a place where they really can think about this stuff and pray about this stuff and just let it be, just be with it a little bit, you know?
Right.
And so you move people through this pre-contemplation, through this contemplation, that next phase. What happens is when people get to the contemplation stage and they achieve the goal of a decision to change, people immediately jump to action. And that's part of the beauty and one of the most important aspects of De Clementi's model. As he said, look, it's this preparation stage actually that is crucial from this point forward.
Mm.
So I use the example of let's say somebody decided they needed more recreation in their life. Okay, I enjoy the outdoors. I like animals. You know, I remember I rode a horse one time when I was young. I think I'd like to kind of explore horseback riding. All right. So if they're 40 and they decide they want to start horseback riding for recreation, if they just immediately go out and rent a horse and they ride for an hour and a half, but they aren't prepared for everything that can happen along the way.
Right.
Horses bite, saddles break, they kick. And then if everything goes well, when you get off of that horse after an hour and a half, right? All right.
Painful.
So yeah, and then it's like, man, I don't think I want to do horseback riding.
What
Well, they weren't prepared.
that's a beautiful illustration.
Yeah. So you just got to be prepared. Well, it's the same thing when you're making these kinds of changes, is there has to be a preparation. There needs to be a preparation phase where you make a commit, you strengthen the commitment to take the action before actually taking it, right? And you develop, that's where you develop the plan and the strategy for the change. So you aren't even implementing it yet. And so this is where just good problem solving, you know, what am I going to do with this? You know, what are the things I can implement? Evaluating that plan, you know, doing some of your SMART goals kind of stuff, you know, and really kind of teasing it out. Just the action of creating that plan is part of the preparation phase. In other words, the more I invest in that change process, the more I'm prepared to actually do it when the time comes.
Hmm.
So you can see where if we go from contemplation straight to action, it's not that that can't ever work. It's just, you know, the kinds of changes we're talking about really have some implications, not just for me, but for others in my life. And, you know, there are going to be some costs that I'm going to have to absorb, like somebody getting frustrated with me when I don't pick their socks up anymore, you know, things like that. You know, I got to be ready for that stuff before I actually just go do it. Because then in my calculations, if I have pain, but I'm not yet committed to the change, then I'm going to stop the change. I'm going to interrupt. I'm going to short circuit the change process.
Well, and it's like like running a marathon, right? You just don't go out there and run 24, is it 24 or 26 miles?
26. Yeah.
Apparently, I haven't run one before and don't want to, but if I did, I know it would involve a lot of preparation, and
Right.
that's what you're talking about. Like,
Yeah.
what book am I going to read? What group am I going to join? How am I going to fit the time in to
Right.
train, right? What's
And
the
it's not just being ready. See, it's not just being ready for some of the painful things that might happen. It's I've kind of got to be ready for the good things I'm after when they happen. Because see, if I'm not prepared, am I really at a place where I'm willing to receive the good blessing that comes from this change?
Right. And
Am
that's,
I, do I deem myself worthy of, having a better life? I mean, what happens when you actually pull a change off and somebody congratulates you on that success? Can you simply humbly receive that?
right.
So we
And
got to be ready for the good stuff too.
well, and I think that was a big motivator for me
Mhm.
when I think back to the reasons that I wanted this change. It wasn't only the bad things I was experiencing, but I was divorced,
Yeah,
29-year marriage, right? I was single. And when I looked at what I wanted, I
right.
did not want a man who would want me the way I was, because
Yeah,
that would mean that I was a big time partier in the bars
right,
a lot, right?
right, right,
And and so my desire for a partner that looked different and, for this godly relationship
right,
had to begin with me looking different. So the
right,
motivation was presenting myself as somebody who was, attractive in a non,
right,
drinking state, a godly man, right?
right.
So those
And so had you moved forward without taking that approach, you can see that that whole addictive, performance-oriented, shame-based cycle,
it wouldn't have
it's only
been,
going to drive you deeper into the problem you're trying to change.
yeah, it wouldn't have.
Yeah,
You're making me think really deeply right now. I mean, and that was a big motivator for me,
yeah,
is who do I want to be? Because
right.
this is not the person, you
Okay,
know?
and see that's part of that whole change calculus, right? And it's part of preparing to change. Jesus talked about counting the costs, right? I mean,
Hmm.
it's just wise to count those costs. And that's part of that preparation phase is building that commitment to change based upon how important that change is.
Right,
And
right,
so that's where you can link to these larger values, and desires that you have.
right. Well,
Right? And so the goal of the is to develop an action plan in the near future and then get ready to implement it. So
that's
those are the first
I
three
love
stages.
it. Well, thank you for those
Sure.
are definitely, I can see that in my own walk. I can see that in other people's walk. Like I said, the conversations that I have with people are exactly to figure out if they're ready. And yeah, that's exactly what has to happen. You have to get to this point. And some people have a hard times with addiction,
Mhm.
believing that there's something better for them. And
Right,
that's the hardest part.
right. Yeah, yeah. Some had a time like that in their life and they're hoping to get back some of that. Others who have never had that, it's kind of a different journey for them, actually.
Right, right.
They
But
have
that
to create it from scratch,
Well,
right?
and that's
They
why
don't have a reference
I mean,
point.
I'm going to spend a moment on a commercial break here and
Sure, yep,
recommend the book between, episode or part one and part
sure,
two. Get the book. There's workbooks in here, questions that you can ask yourself. It's called
right,
Prepare to Quit. It's everywhere books are sold, but it'll bring you along gently, as you say, to just try and figure out, get you through that. Contemplation stage, and hopefully by the end of the book, and by the way, it's super short book, super, it's meant to be done in
mhm,
like less than 2 hours. uh the work isn't less than 2 hours, but if you need something quick, it's
right.
designed to be a really easy read. But until next time, when we talk about the final stages of change, which are action and maintenance,
Mhm,
right? So,
mhm,
well, thank you, David, and
sure.
until next time.
Look forward to it.